The most terrifying night of my life was that one. I needed to rush to the hospital because my water broke. However, my husband abruptly drove to an ATM, pulled over, and told me to take out $220,000 and deliver it to him instead of driving me there. He threatened he wouldn't take me to the hospital if I didn't agree. I refused, and he pulled me from the car, flung me down the road, and drove off, leaving me defenseless and in labor. The next thing that happened was worse than I could have ever imagined. I'm 29 years old, and my name is Selena. I'll be a mother for the first time in a few days. My marriage isn't what I expected it to be. Therefore, I should be thrilled, content, and full of love. But I'm not. 5 years ago, I met Damien, my husband. He had a way of making me feel like the most special person in the world back then, and he was charming and self-assured. But when we were married, things took a different turn. His love gradually faded. He lost interest in my emotions, difficulties, and contentment. I believed he would be the spouse I needed when I informed him I was expecting. I was mistaken. Damien viewed my pregnancy as a hassle rather than a source of support. He made it plain that his life would not change simply because I was expecting his kid, disregarded me when I was ill, and refused to help with chores. Now, at 9 months pregnant, I had accepted the reality of my marriage. Damien didn't love me. He didn't care about our baby. And deep down, I knew I would have to raise this child alone. But I never imagined that he would betray me in the worst way possible. That evening, I sat at the dining table, exhausted from another long day. I had spent hours cleaning, folding laundry, and preparing dinner, even though my body was aching from the weight of my belly. I looked at the clock. 8:45 p.m. Damien was late again. I sighed, pushing my food around the plate. I wasn't even hungry anymore. Just as I was about to get up, the front door swung open. Damien walked in, looking tired but indifferent. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He just threw his bag onto the couch, took off his jacket, and sat down at the table, scrolling through his phone like I wasn't even there. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You're late." He didn't even look up. "I was busy," he said. I bit my lip, trying to ignore the anger bubbling inside me. "I made dinner," I said, keeping my voice calm. Damien finally glanced up at his plate. His expression immediately soured. "Pasta again," he muttered, pushing his fork into the food like it was something disgusting. I clenched my fists under the table. "Yes, Damien, because I'm 9 months pregnant and can't stand in the kitchen all day cooking 3-course meals." He rolled his eyes. "Whatever." Then, without another word, he grabbed his fork and began eating in silence. I watched him, feeling a deep, painful emptiness inside me. This wasn't love. This was a marriage, and the worst part, I knew he didn't even care that I was hurting. I tried to finish my meal, but suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my lower stomach. I gasped, dropping my fork onto my plate. A second later, I felt a warm rush of liquid. I froze. My water just broke. I looked down, my heart racing as I saw the chair beneath me getting wet. Oh my God, it's happening. I grabbed the edge of the table, breathing heavily. Damien, he didn't even look up. "What now?" he said. I swallowed hard, my voice shaking. My water just broke. Damien finally lifted his head, his expression blank. "Right now?" he asked, as if I had a choice. I nodded quickly, struggling to stand up. A strong contraction hit me, and I winced. Damien let out an annoyed sigh. Fine, let's go. He stood up, as if this was just some minor inconvenience, and grabbed his car keys. I reached for my hospital bag, my hands trembling. This was it. I was about to have my baby. But I had no idea that Damien had one last act of cruelty left to show me. The car was silent, except for my heavy breathing. I gripped the door handle, my body tensing as another sharp contraction hit me. Damien sat in the driver's seat, one hand on the wheel, the other casually tapping his fingers on the dashboard. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. The hospital wasn't far. We just had to get there safely. But deep down, something felt wrong. Instead of being concerned about my pain, Damien looked bored and irritated. "You don't have to breathe so loudly, Selena," he muttered. "It's distracting." I turned my head, staring at him in disbelief. "Damien, I'm in labor," I said, my voice tight. "This is literally the worst pain of my life, and you're complaining about my breathing." He shrugged. "It's just a little overdramatic, don't you think?" I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to ignore him. I didn't have the energy to argue. Not now. I focused on the road ahead, counting the seconds until we reached the hospital. Then, just when I thought we were getting closer, Damien suddenly slowed down. I frowned. "Why are you slowing down?" Without answering, he turned the car sharply, pulling into a dark, empty parking lot. I looked around, confused. Then I saw an ATM. My stomach dropped. "Damien, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice filled with panic. He put the car in park, turned to face me, and then said the words that would haunt me forever. "Before we go to the hospital," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I need you to withdraw $220,000. I froze for a moment. I thought I had misheard him. I let out a shaky breath. "Damien, what are you talking about?" He leaned back in his seat, completely relaxed. "You have money, don't you? You've been saving for years," he said smoothly. "I need $220,000. I stared at him, my heart pounding. "Damien," I said slowly, "I'm in labor. The baby is coming. This isn't the time." "Now is the perfect time," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "You want to get to the hospital, don't you? Then give me what I want." Tears burned in my eyes. "Damien, please, just take me to the hospital," I begged. He sighed dramatically. "I'm not asking for much, Selena. Just get out, go to the ATM, and take out the money." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just cruelty. This was blackmail. I was in the worst pain of my life, and the man who was supposed to love me was using it to get money. I felt sick. I shook my head. "No." Damien's jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. "Selena," he warned, "you're already out of breath, sweating, and barely holding on. Do you really want to argue right now?" I couldn't believe it. "You're disgusting," I whispered. "I would rather crawl to the hospital than give you a single cent." Damien's expression turned cold, and then, before I could react, he reached over, unbuckled my seatbelt, and yanked the car door open. My breath hitched. "What are you doing?" Without a second thought, he grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the car. "Damien, stop. Stop." I screamed as another contraction hit me, but he didn't care. With zero hesitation, he shoved me onto the pavement. I fell hard, my hands scraping against the rough ground. My belly tightened painfully, and I gasped for air. I was on the cold pavement, abandoned in labor, and Damien, he looked down at me completely unfazed. You should have just given me the money, he muttered. Then, without another word, he got back in the car, slammed the door shut, and drove away. I laid there, trembling, tears streaming down my face, completely alone. But suddenly, in the distance, I saw something headlights. Someone was coming, and they were about to save my life. I lay on the cold pavement, gasping as another sharp contraction tore through me. My body was trembling, my hands scraped and bleeding. But the pain in my heart was worse than anything I felt physically. Damien had really left me here alone, abandoned all for money. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to breathe. My baby needed me to be strong. Then, through my pain and dizziness, I saw something headlights. A car was coming closer. I tried to sit up, but my body felt too weak. The car pulled up fast, stopping just a few feet away. The door flew open, and then I heard a familiar voice. Oh my God, Selena. It was Livia, my neighbor, my friend, my only lifelong friend. Livia ran toward me, her face filled with pure panic as she knelt beside me, gripping my shoulders. What happened? Are you okay? Why are you on the ground? I tried to speak, but I could barely breathe. Then, between shaky gasps, I choked out the truth. Damien, he stopped here. He told me to give him $220,000 before he took me to the hospital. Livia's eyes widened in horror. I sucked in a painful breath. I said no, and then he threw me out and drove away. Livia's expression transformed from shock to pure rage. That son of a... She cut herself off, shaking her head. I'm calling the police. She pulled out her phone and immediately dialed. As Livia talked to the emergency operator, she grabbed my arm. Can you stand? She asked urgently. I nodded weakly, trying to push myself up. Livia wrapped her arms around me and helped me to my feet. The moment I stood, another contraction hit. I cried out, gripping Livia's shoulder. You're okay. I've got you. She helped me to the passenger seat of her car, buckled me in, and sped off. The car was moving fast, but my body felt slower and heavier with pain. I clutched my belly, panting through the contractions. Just hold on, Selena, Livia said, her voice shaking. We're almost there. I nodded, squeezing my eyes shut. Damien had left me to die on the street, but Livia, she was fighting to save me. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't alone. The car raced through the streets, every bump sending another wave of pain through my body. I clutched my belly, my breathing shaky and uneven. Almost there, Livia called out, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. I bit my lip, fighting back tears of pain and exhaustion. The moment we pulled into the hospital entrance, Livia slammed the brakes and jumped out of the car. She ran toward the hospital doors, yelling for help. Within seconds, 2 nurses and a doctor rushed outside with a wheelchair. One of the nurses helped me out of the car as I let out a weak, pained sob. You're safe now, Mom. We've got you. As they wheeled me inside, I saw 2 familiar figures running toward me. Selena. It was my mother and father. Tears streamed down my face the moment I saw them. My mother knelt beside me, gripping my hand tightly. Sweetheart, we're here. What happened? I could barely form the words. Damien, he left me. I stammered, my breath uneven. My father's face darkened. Where is he now? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. Livia stepped forward. He threw her out of the car because she refused to give him $220,000. He just left her there, alone in labor. My mother gasped in horror. My father's hands curled into fists. That bastard. Then, with deadly determination, he turned to Livia. We're reporting this right now. Livia nodded. I already called the police. They're on their way. I let out a shaky breath, relief washing over me. For the first time that night, I felt safe. Damien wouldn't get away with this. Not this time. Just as they wheeled me toward the delivery room, I heard voices behind me. We're looking for Selena Carter. I turned my head slightly and saw two uniformed officers standing at the hospital entrance. Livia approached them first. She's inside, about to have the baby. I'll tell you everything. One of the officers nodded. We're already looking for Damon Blackwood. His actions tonight were criminal. Hearing those words sent a wave of relief through me. They were going to find him. They were going to make him pay. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The delivery room was a blur of bright lights, voices, and unbearable pain. I gripped my mother's hand as another contraction ripped through me. My whole body was shaking, my breath uneven, but I knew I had to push through. You're doing great, Selena. Almost there, the doctor said. I squeezed my eyes shut, letting out a choked sob of exhaustion. Then, after what felt like an eternity, a sharp cry filled the room. Tears streamed down my face as I heard my baby for the— She's probably exaggerating, he shouted, but the officers ignored him. You left your pregnant wife on the street while she was in labor, one of them said coldly. That's not exaggeration. That's a crime. Damon's mother gasped in shock. Tell me this isn't true. But it was too late. The officers shoved Damon toward the police car. His life, his control over me, his power, his arrogance, was crumbling. For the first time, Damon looked afraid. And it was about time. The next morning, as I lay in my hospital bed holding my son, my father walked in, his expression serious. Two officers approached him, handcuffs ready. You ruined my life, Selena. He spat at me. You think you won? You'll regret this. I lifted my chin, looking him straight in the eyes. The only thing I regret is ever trusting you. The officers dragged him away, his shouts echoing through the courtroom. I let out a deep breath, my body shaking with relief. It was over. Damon was gone, and I was finally free. When Damon was taken away, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. No more fear. No more walking on eggshells. No more feeling like I was trapped in a loveless marriage. I was free, and so was my son. 2 weeks after the trial, my divorce was finalized. Damon no longer had any legal ties to me or my son. I was granted full custody. He was legally required to stay away from us, even after his prison sentence. I sat in my lawyer's office, signing the final papers, my hands steady and sure. Congratulations, Selena, my lawyer said. You're officially free. I let out a deep, relieved breath. It was finally over. For the next few months, I focused on healing and rebuilding my life. My parents helped me take care of my son while I adjusted to motherhood. Livia became like a sister to me, always checking in and supporting me. I started therapy, learning to heal from years of emotional abuse. I continued blogging, but this time, my posts weren't just about small joys. They were about strength, survival, and starting over. Most importantly, I learned to love myself again. I had spent so long trapped in a toxic marriage, believing that I didn't deserve better, But now I knew my worth. I was a survivor. From time to time, I heard small updates about Damon. He struggled in prison, unable to manipulate his way out. He lost everything: his job, his reputation, his control over me. His parents disowned him after learning the full extent of what he did. He tried to appeal his sentence, but the court rejected him. The last thing I heard, he was completely alone. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad for him. He made his choices. He lived with the consequences. And me? At last, I was no longer under his shadow. I was sitting at the window one morning with my son in my arms. His brilliant eyes were staring up at me with genuine affection, and he had grown so much in just a few months. I kissed his little forehead and grinned. "It's just you and me now, baby." His little fingers gripped mine as he giggled softly. I closed my eyes and absorbed the scene. In addition to everything that was important to me: freedom, my happiness, and the purest love I had ever experienced, had gained my kid. We were at last free, so I knew that no matter what the future brought, we would be all right.